workshops. Feel free to take a screenshot of that if you wish, but we will also be sending that out to remind everybody of the upcoming online and in-person workshops. So without further ado, let's get into our prevention within and across borders. We're excited to have a terrific lineup of speakers. We feel that we have a lot to offer today. So thanks again for all of our speakers for sharing your time and expertise with us. So each of our speaker has been given a time slot for the presentation, including questions. We'll have a quick 5-minute bio break at 2:30 for about 5 minutes. So with that introduction and the Tennessean warning and the expectations, I think we can launch into our first speaker. So Lisa, are you online and available?
I am.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing. If I can find the stop sharing button. Well, it keeps going away. I'm rolling over it and it keeps going away. Why is it doing that? Have I stopped sharing, Rafa?
You have. Yeah, we are seeing Lisa's presentation now.
Okay.
Okay, so you are seeing the presentation, Raf?
Yes, I can see it.
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
Looks
well,
like
thanks.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Lisa Debricare. I'm the president of Creative Resource Strategies. It's a consulting company I started in 2002 after working for 11 years with the Missouri Department of Conservation and about another 8 or 9 years in various state governments, including the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife in the Pacific Northwest. I've spent much of the last 20 years working on AIS issues with both the Canadian provinces and primarily the Western states, although for the last couple of years, some of that focus and attention has shifted more towards working with the Midwest states as well. Today, I'm going to be talking about preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species by trailered watercraft. And this portion of the project is funded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, which has been funding a lot of AIS efforts in the West for over the last 10 years. So all of you are very aware of the issue. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. I just want all of you to know that we are equally concerned in the Western states about sending any AIS to the Midwest and Eastern states, as all of you are, in terms of sending AIS to the West. So I think there's mutual interest in this topic of AIS being moved by trailered watercraft, and especially with the introduction of golden mussels to the port of Stockton, California in October of 2024. That's something we are greatly concerned about nationwide. It is spreading, it will continue to spread. And so all of the efforts that we're collectively doing to lessen the rate of that spread and hopefully potentially ultimately stop it if we can will be significant. We're all aware that boats are on the move. There's 85 million Americans that boat annually. Many of these boats are less than 26 feet long, so a lot of them are recreational boats, and the majority of those are moved by trailered vehicles. Over 1.5 million Americans purchase new boats annually, and so that's sort of this new customer base. So we're continuing to bring new people into the fold that we have to reach out to and work with on AIS issues. And of course, you're all aware of the numerous economic, environmental, and social effects of AIS. It costs us a lot. It results in restrictions. It affects our infrastructure. It affects our ability to move water. There's loss of revenue to communities. It affects tourism dollars. The food chain is disrupted. And that's why this is such a critical issue. And the more of us that are working on it together, the better the end results will be. I mentioned the golden mussel, which is the graph, excuse me, or map in the upper right. It was introduced into the port of Stockton, and you can see where it has spreaded. This map is up to date as of yesterday. predicting it's likely going to head east out of California, potentially get into the lower Colorado River system, and likely move up from that, just given the way that boats move in the Southwest. We're very concerned in the Pacific Northwest that it doesn't move any further north than the San Francisco area. But this is a tough nut to crack. This is a very robust species. It has much greater environmental tolerances than either quagga or zebra mussels. And I put the two charts as well from USGS NAS on the current distributions of zebra and quagga mussels. I wanted to share with you just a few slides about watercraft interceptions on a more recent basis from 2012 to 2014. These are watercraft that were intercepted by Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. And as I share those charts, I also want to discuss a little bit about the watercraft inspection stations that exist around the West and that continue to be expanded upon in the Midwest. And hopefully there will be WRDA funding in the future for the Great Lakes region and some of the Midwest states so that we have this robust national network of watercraft inspection and decontamination stations. But I also put up this chart to say, even if your state doesn't have federally funded watercraft inspection and decontamination stations, what you are doing, and I'll show some examples of that, is really important to create that comprehensive program that we have as a nation to prevent the movement of AIS by trailered watercraft. So some of the interceptions by source. So these are in infested boats, quagga zebra mussels that were intercepted in the 5 Pacific Northwest states and where they came from. And this is 2012 to 2024. And so you can see a number of them do come from the Great Lakes region. And you'll also see some Great Lakes states separated out from the Great Lakes region. And that's just a matter of how some entities or boaters reported where they came from. But by and far, the largest number of boats infested with dracenids or quagga and zebra mussels to the 5 Pacific Northwest states and Canadian provinces have come from the Great Lakes region and lower Colorado River regions of the country. Here's another graph just sort of showing that in a different way, where the Southwest is in orange, the Midwest is in yellow. And here's some of the specific water bodies in the Southwest where we're picking up infested boats from. So you can see Lake Powell is that blue bar on the bottom. Lake Havasu is the pink one. And then green is Lake Pleasant. Utah is black, Arizona orange, Colorado River brown, and that darker green is Oklahoma. That's for 2024. And you can see we've had some interceptions from Texas as well. And so we track this just to get a sense of what's happening with trends, how are things changing, especially as states and the federal government and communities ramp up their outreach and education and watercraft inspection efforts. These are interceptions from 2012, sorry, that's a typo up top, 2012 to 2024 from the US Midwest region. And so you can see the Great Lakes is in blue, but again, some of the Great Lakes states are pulled out from this as separate colors simply because of the way either the boater reported it or the watercraft inspection station reported it. So really interesting numbers to see. I want to show a couple of slides from the state of Washington, who intercepted a commercial tugboat from Lake Michigan. And what we're finding, and this is really interesting to us, is that we are intercepting more and more barges and commercial vessels that are not watercraft, that these are used for commercial purposes to dredge, as tugs, etc. These are mussels that we scraped off, excuse me, scraped off that boat when it was intercepted in the state of Washington. So it's no small amount of mussels that went through this inspection station. And we did not get any notification that this barge was headed to the Pacific Northwest. And it's really important, not to the Pacific Northwest especially, but to several regions of our country and Canada who rely on hydropower to provide energy. The Columbia Snake River system is one of the largest renewable energy sources in the United States. And all of you are very aware of how quagga and zebra mussels clog intakes, cooling systems, and gates, and the costs that all of your systems have experienced since these mussels were introduced to the Great Lakes systems years ago. And just a few more examples that Washington wanted to share. And one example with golden mussels from Brazil's electricity sector. And so there's entities all over the world that are experiencing the effects of the movement of AIS. And so this isn't a finger pointing exercise at all. It's really about how can we look at this thing globally, across North America, nationally, to help stem the movement of a lot of these aquatic invasive species. I do have a couple of examples as recently from 2025 from Montana inspection stations, just so that you can see kind of the diversity of boats that we're intercepting. Some of these were commercially hauled, some were not. One of them is a new boat. Excuse me. It was launched, the one on the left was launched in Lake Cayuga in New York. And you can just see we've got some information here, boats that we intercepted that were infested with draconids. Montana offered to share a couple of slides from their state. These are interceptions from 2017 to 2025. So 229 of the 327 vessels came from, that were fouled vessels with draconids, came from Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. And then ones that came from the Southwest, the majority of those came from Arizona. And I'm mentioning those states as I lead into some strategies and things that we'd like to talk about and work together on. But I want to talk about steps that have been taken to address the issue, because a lot of great work is going on. You know, we've been talking about clean, drain, dry as a nation, and states and watershed districts, in counties, provinces for well over a decade. In addition to that, we've got the landing blitz that you guys are doing an amazing job on in the Great Lakes. We've got the Invasive Mussel Collaborative. We've got the Aquatic Non-Indigenous Species Information System. We've got all the great work of the sea grants that are happening nationally, the Great Lakes Panel on ANS, and just all of the other work that the Western states are doing. So I think there's pause here to say, you know, we've been working together, we've been trying, we're doing a good job. There's a lot more work to be done, but I think there is a lot to be said for the collective effort across the states and provinces on this issue. In addition to that, we've been doing a bunch of social media engagement, primarily with commercial boaters, just to get the word out to them that we do have this Call Before You Haul program, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. But also just to talk with them and to be with them where they are. Right? So when these guys commercially haul a boat, and these smaller companies do, a lot of them find their clients by going on Facebook, especially these smaller haulers that just have an F-250 or a fleet of small vehicles to haul boats. And so we've been reaching out to commercial haulers as well as recreational boaters online and just engaging with them and sharing information. The Call Before You Haul program was started about 3 years ago, and it's basically a way that any boater, recreational or commercial, can call the hotline and say, hey, I'm moving a boat across interstate lines. I'd like to make arrangements for an inspection and, if need be, a free decontamination. And we get that information, we notify the destination state. And with the idea being that as they work through that network of watercraft inspection and decontamination stations throughout the West to get to their destination, they have expedited movement through those stations because we know once that boat gets to its destination, it will be inspected and, if need be, decontaminated. This is a program that was started by Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, and we continue to work on it with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as well. We've also done a lot of direct outreach to trucking associations, particularly in the lower Colorado River regions and Great Lakes region of the country. We've asked them to put information about AIS, Call Before You Haul, Clean, Drain, Dry, on their websites and on their electronic newsletters that they provide to truckers that are members of their organizations. And many of these folks have been very compliant and have provided the information that we've given them to their truckers. The Call Before You Haul hotline, we're at about 2,800 calls into the hotline now. 2023 was the first full year. But new in November of 2025, we now have an online self-reporting system. So someone can go online, go to that link, and they can type in, this is who I am, this is what I'm hauling, this is where I'm going, and this is the route I'm taking. And we'll get back to them via phone or email and make arrangements for that inspection and, if need be, decontamination. I think the bottom line to all of this is if Call Before You Haul and all of these other efforts are successful, the goal really is to protect all states and provinces, not just the Pacific Northwest. And so we're really hoping to get even further engagement and use of this system. And ultimately, we see it working in the opposite direction as well, where if any of the Great Lakes states or Midwest states or Eastern states want to be notified of boats that are coming out of California and headed your way, we can get you into this system. And so that's one thing I wanted to put out there today. I think since we started it, that focus was on the Pacific Northwest, but we'd like to see it expanded across the nation. I want to just take my hat off to both Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota. Your state departments of transportation have done a great job working with us on making Call Before You Haul a condition on their permits. There is no regulation or law that requires them to do that, but this is the example of the Wisconsin oversize overweight permit. And front and center, they tell you, you get this permit, you must call before you haul, call that phone number and make arrangements. So we've appreciated all of these efforts. This is an example of the 2022 permit. The 2026 permit says the same thing. These are the states participating in the Call Before You Haul program at this point in time. Peach-colored ones have committed, but they've not quite done anything yet. Arizona is a really important state for us to get on board. It's going to be especially important for all of you in the Great Lakes states for us to get Arizona on board, because these boats, these infested boats, are going to be coming out of California, going into Arizona, and from there they're going to be spreading north and east. And so that's really critical that we get Arizona on board. It took about 1.5 years to get all of the green states on board, and we thank all of your states for participating in this effort. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of is we just recently worked with the National Sea Grant Law Center to develop a national model clean watercraft interstate transport law. And what we hope to do with that is when the political environment is more receptive to something like this, it will prevent the interstate transport of aquatic invasive species via trailered watercraft. It will be a national law. So we did all the work of working with states and different entities to look at the language. We had focus groups, etc. I encourage you to go to the National Sea Grant Law Center website and take a look at that interstate law. It's just another piece of this larger network of collaboration that we think will help ultimately prevent the spread of AIS via trailered watercraft. So where are we with Call Before You Haul? Well, right now we're at phase 3 of that program. This is the phase that is supported by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We've done a lot of direct mail engagement. We're documenting key issues and challenges. We've developed a data sharing tool. We're doing focus groups and workshops, and we're meeting with boat haulers, DOTs, inspectors at WID stations, and marinas in both the Lower Colorado River and Great Lakes regions. And then the rest of this work will happen after this summer. So we did the kickoff webinar. We had over 100 people participating in that, just talked about what we would be doing in 2026 and 2027. Surprisingly, we could not find one online database that had up-to-date information on marinas in either the Lower Colorado or Great Lakes regions. We had partial data sets, and so went through the process of checking what was out there and then contacting marinas directly and then building our own database that's now shared publicly on Esri ArcGIS. We also have an Airtable, and I can send some of the links to these to you guys in the chat after the presentation. What it does, it shares information on boat transporters and a questionnaire that we did. It talks about state regulations, and by state, all the different boat transport regulations, AIS transport restrictions, cleaning requirements, draining requirements, and drying requirements for each of the states, and citations to back those up. In addition to that, we've started to build out a third piece on issues and challenges by region and potential solutions. We did do a major outreach to marinas in the Great Lakes and Lower Colorado River regions a couple of months ago. One piece of the brochure was something that marinas could post at their locations if they chose to. It emphasizes clean, drain, dry, and call before you haul, with links to learn more. And it really, one of the brochures was targeted towards commercial haulers. The other was targeted towards recreation boaters. And then, of course, we emphasize the new online reporting form. I wanted to share with you before I conclude just a couple of responses from the boat transporter questionnaire. This is something that we just recently launched, but it's got some preliminary information. It's just kind of interesting what boaters are telling us, or transporters are telling us so far, the things that are sort of starting to pop out with this small sample size. There's lack of easily accessible facilities to inspect and decontaminate prior to transport. There's complex, different, or inconsistent regulations across the states and or provinces. The time it takes to stop at each watercraft inspection and decontamination station, it's pretty lengthy. And there's lack of regulatory oversight of watercraft that are hauled. And so those sort of started to jump out at us. And there seems to be quite a bit of information out there because of all the great work folks like you have been doing, and the other states are reaching out to boaters. It's like people seem to know what to do. They're not quite sure where to get the tools that they can access to fully clean, drain, dry, especially when it comes to dracenids. And then some of the open-ended comments. We know people skirt these stations, so it doesn't matter if we have a full network of watercraft inspection stations in the United States. We're never going to have enough money and resources to intercept all the boats that are moving on the roads that we have. And I think that's why it's so important. All of these landing blitzes and things that you guys are doing are really important. We've been receiving some encouragement to communicate directly to marinas. Notification prior to getting to a watercraft inspection station, giving people enough notice. And then they want to have a system where they just need to be inspected once. So they still don't like the idea of having to stop along the way. And there's opportunities for us to work on that. I've just formed a focus group of inspection folks in the Western states to see if we can figure that piece of it out, to discourage the skirting around stations, to allow folks to expedite through. One of these comments was to force every state to agree on a single set of regulations and requirements for inspecting boats and clear expectations across the country. And finding inspection stations is frustrating, even though we've been publishing the maps. I don't know, do all of you have links to that watercraft inspection station online map for your boaters that might be heading west? We've got to figure out a way to get that information into the hands of boaters. We're also working with marinas on some potential language, and I'll be working with Tim Campbell and some folks in the Great Lakes region on this in the coming months, seeing what language they have at marinas for clean, drain, dry, and seeing if they're receptive to adding language if they don't currently have it. And of course, the Clean Marina program could be a critical component of this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the presentation after this one. Short-term next steps: to continue to identify the challenges to transporting clean, drain, dry, working with marinas and existing organizations that work with marinas, visiting the WID stations en route to the Great Lakes and back and lower Colorado River regions, promoting the online Call Before You Haul. And I want to share with you this recent idea of a pilot incentive program for commercial haulers. The idea is to create this certified clean haul program. It doesn't cost a business anything to do it, but the idea would be that they could help protect our waters, and we could help promote responsible commercial watercraft transporters. So it would be a partnership. The company would commit to clean, drain, dry protocol and using the Call Before You Haul system. And we would develop a national clean haul directory. It would be a first stop for boat owners that want a safe, legal, and hassle-free transport. And certified clean haul members would receive expedited processing through inspection stations after the first inspection. We would do the verification of DOT-MC numbers and insurance. It's because this is already done through the Federal Highway Administration, and we all have access to that database. And so we would pull from that database to let boaters know if companies that they're looking into have insurance and have agreed to the Clean Haul Pledge, which is inspect, report, and protect. The ultimate reward being a stronger business, a cleaner environment, and fewer delays transporting boats. So that's something we're thinking and talking about, and we'll be talking with the Great Lakes region in the coming months about what folks think about that, and if we can bring it online. So I'm open for any questions. I also want to put it out there, if you're interested in participating in a work group or focus group to discuss strategies to work together to prevent the spread of AIS from the Western states to you in the Great Lakes, or from you out to us, I am happy to have those conversations with you, especially prior to my trips out to the Great Lakes. And so you have my contact information, and I thank all of you for being part of this today, and for Doug and Rafa for coordinating it, and you folks at DNR, and take any questions. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a terrific presentation. Not seeing any questions in the chat, but I do have one for you. So, but first a comment. So here in the state of Minnesota, we're the only state in the nation that can claim that we have a statewide AIS program, because our counties, 83 of our 87 counties, receive AIS prevention aid funding for implementation of local programs. So the question for you is, how can we help support this effort as a part of a statewide effort? Some of us are statewide agencies, and there's also tribal organizations that are represented here that represent different regions of the state. But then we have many of the counties and Lake Association members also on this workshop. How can we help support this effort?
Yeah, I think sharing, and I'll put the link in the chat, sharing access to all the watercraft inspection stations in the West map, sharing the link to the Call Before You Haul website on westernais.org, and I can put that in the chat. Just sharing information back and forth and participating in any focus groups. I'm really anxious to start conversations with folks in the Great Lakes as we wrap up things in the lower Colorado River region, which is where our focus has been over the last couple of months. Would really like to talk with Sea Grant, some of your county folks, your state folks, and see what we can do too. We are very worried about golden mussels and them getting out of California and spreading to other states. And we definitely have to keep them out of the Great Lakes if at all possible.
Sure, and we'll be hearing from Tom here in a little bit about golden mussels after our break. So we're excited to have Tom on the line to give us some more information about that. Um, so my reaction to your suggestion there is, are you going to be working with Tim to maybe put together sort of a checklist of what people can do if there was maybe a menu of things that we could do as a state, counties could do. Um, the capacity for taking on other responsibilities is really going to vary from county to county, depending upon how much resources they have and how much capacity they have. But maybe they could pick and choose things that they could do within their counties by contacting local commercial haulers, as you had identified earlier, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And I'm happy also to provide the brochures and things that we've given to those haulers that we've contacted, and that can be supplemented if folks are willing to do that locally on the ground there.
yeah, can those materials be tailored by the state or the county
Yep,
for
they sure
distribution
can.
with
Yep, I can
contact
give you guys the
information?
raw, I can give you the raw
Oh,
files. Yep,
that'd be awesome.
yep.
Rafa, do we have any questions in the chat? I didn't see any.
No, we do not have any questions yet, but
Okay.
I do. Well, actually, we do have one now. So this is a question from Aaron Henderson. Do commercial haulers receive documentation regarding whether they have been inspected? Is there a hesitancy handing out that documentation?
It all depends on where the boat was inspected. And that's these differences between the states that's making this program really difficult to actually implement broad scale. Some boats that are inspected end up getting a seal on it of some kind that some states use. And there's reciprocity across a few of the states as well. There isn't any hesitancy handing out documentation. When a boat does get inspected, or if it gets put into the call before you haul system, or if it goes through a watercraft inspection station, it is in a database that's available for the states to communicate as that boat moves across the country. So we've got this database system of information, and we've been able to address the privacy laws and issues associated with that. But it is complex. Some states do not want to participate because they feel like they don't, they're not fully supportive of how other states have navigated those privacy issues. But the short answer is yes and no. For some states, yes.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I do have a question. Well, after Amanda, I want to make sure that people get their questions. So Amanda.
I just have a question about involving tribes.
Sure. Yeah, we work very closely with the tribes in the western states. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks works with the tribes. Idaho Fish and Game works with the tribes. It's really, really important. Anything we can do to help the tribes, anything the tribes can do to get haulers participating in call before you haul. It's a very mutual relationship. And yes, absolutely, critically important.
Spencer, go ahead.
Hey, this is Spencer Mercury, Ottertail County. I did mention in the chat, but I just want to memorialize it over here. I'd like to see better call before you haul communication between the DNR and the counties, the LGUs. I know they are required, if there's hauling like aquatic plant harvesters, to make sure those are clean and notify the state within 24 hours of their movement. I know that's difficult to do. But I'd like to see more communication to the LGUs when those harvesters are moving around. Thanks.
Yeah, Spencer, if you want to connect with Mike Belinsky, our DNR watercraft inspection supervisor in your region, he's the ones that gets those calls. So you could connect with him on communicating that. Thanks.
Super, thanks.
Does anybody else have a question? We have a great turnout, by the way. We have 69 people, according to my team's score.
I do have a question. So my question is for marinas. Can you expand a little bit more on the process of how you compile the list, how you got in contact with them? Did everybody respond? Is it kind of like an exhaustive list? Because I know that some might not have responded, some might not want to be involved. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, the initial phase of it was just outreach to the marinas, just to let them know what Call Before You Haul is, talk about AIS, let them know what the program is. So it was a mailing, it was a direct mailing. And it's interesting how often marinas go in and out of business, and you guys are probably very aware of that. And that's why so many of these databases were outdated. But yeah, it was just direct outreach, direct mailing to all of the marinas that we were able to locate as being in business in the Great Lakes region, both Canada and the United States, as well as the lower Colorado. And then the idea being we'll follow up with them and work hopefully locally with folks that work with these marinas on a regular basis with the Clean Marina programs, et cetera, to talk more about engagement with them. What kind of language do they have in their slip leases about clean, drain, dry, that sort of thing?
Thank you. And as a follow-up, since you mentioned that they kind of go in and out of business, is this something that is going to be kept updated? Is there a plan for that?
There will be. It won't be updated on a monthly basis, but we've got the funding once a year to go ahead and do a scrub and keep that Esri database online.
Okay.
Lisa, I have a question. So, every state has a aquatic invasive species program except for just a couple. And looking at your map there, I was surprised to see there were several states that have had long-standing aquatic invasive species programs, but they've not accepted the invitation to participate. What are the barriers that you're seeing for those states to choose not to participate?
Some of them didn't articulate a reason. Like New Hampshire just said, no way. They're just not going to do it. Texas said no way, but that was Texas Department of Transportation. So I want to be clear that map was not the state Fish and Wildlife Agency or Department of Natural Resources saying no, it was the State Department of Transportation.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was surprised. So Nebraska's had a long-standing AIS program there, so that was one in particular. And I know that New Hampshire Sea Grant has had a AIS program for many, many years. So I was surprised by both of those not accepting the invitation. Anybody else for questions? We've got just a couple minutes left. Anyone else? Just putting up our agenda for folks to know where we're at. Yeah, I'll just make a comment. I think this is very much a needed program. We've known since the early 2000s, since that there were vessels being intercepted all across the nation in many of the western states, but there really wasn't a coordinated effort until this effort came on board. There was even a letter that was drafted and sent to commercial harvesters back in 2000. I helped write that letter, but this is a much more comprehensive program to address the risk. So just want to congratulate you on a great program and hope it goes well, and let us know how we can help support you.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks to all of you for all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, and thank you for coming and presenting for us.
Yeah, very informative. Okay, well, I see we're right on time at 1:49. So thanks again, Lisa, for your terrific presentation. And I think we'll move into our next presentation if Sarah Orlando from Ohio Sea Grant is ready.
I would help if I unmute. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna switch over here and hope that my 3 screens allow me to share the right one with my presentation here with you today.
I can relate.
Yes. So let's see here.
So again, Sarah Orlando is my favorite Clean Marinas coordinator from Ohio Sea Grant. So welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. Perfect. Can you see a full screen here?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay,
Looking good,
awesome.
sounding good.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with several folks because much of what was just mentioned, I think, hopefully ties into what I will share with you. And I hope there's several of you in the room today that I can follow up with for future collaboration. So I am with the Ohio Sea Grant College Program. I run a program called the Ohio Clean Marinas Program, and I like to explain our program like a Facebook relationship and that it's complicated, but it works really well. We are intentionally structured as a collaboration between myself with Ohio Sea Grant. We have another staff member with Ohio Sea Grant, and I actually co-supervise 2 Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Parks and Watercraft staff. So we have a joint relationship and like co-funded relationship that executes the Ohio Clean Marinas program that allows us to work statewide on our efforts. So sometimes Sea Grant dollars are restricted to a watershed such as the Great Lakes. With the additional support from ODNR, our program staff, including myself, are able to work statewide and cover the Lake Erie watershed, as well as all the inland state park marinas and reservoirs down to the Ohio River. So we developed that relationship in 2015 and went statewide so that we truly could deal with our overall mission is intersecting anything with the environment and recreational boating. So that's our niche in the state of Ohio. I'm going to share with you our 2 main buckets that we have under our staff of 4. The first is the Ohio Clean Marinas program. That program is a voluntary program, intentionally non-regulatory, but meant to help marina owners and recreational boating businesses in Ohio understand regulations related to the environment, and through voluntary action, work on getting into compliance and ideally not only meeting those regulations, but going above and beyond. We work with everything from aquatic invasive species to marine debris to oil spills, stormwater prevention, coastal resiliency. Again, kind of anything that deals with the environment and recreational boating is where we seek to provide guidance. Through our partnership with ODNR, with support from university researchers in Ohio, and then additional input, kind of ground truthing from our Ohio Marine Trades Association to make sure that we're making realistic decisions and best management practice recommendations in Ohio. A lot of what we do, yes, we certify marinas for being environmentally friendly, but more often than not, before and after a marina becomes a clean marina, we provide a significant amount of training and education on these types of topics, such as invasive species, to help the marina owners understand the why. Why should they care about whether or not there are aquatic invasive species in their waterway? What economically and environmentally, in terms of dollars and cents, are the justifiable reasons that they can go back to their management staff or their corporate marina management company or their local decision makers and make a case for implementing a practice that might cost money or staff time or upset their boaters to address that environmental issue. And then so that's the training education part. And then the second part of what Clean Marinas does and how we're able to work hopefully with you on some of these issues is implementing specific best management practices that are founded in science, but that are realistic. Again, we're very, we strive to make sure that we're not scaring marinas away by putting out practices that are unachievable. We have a range of practices oftentimes that we work with our marinas to implement to address an issue. The way we see it is something is better than nothing. Yes, we hope to get to the best case scenario where in the case of aquatic invasive species, we are implementing a full scale, boat inspection and management platform. Unfortunately, in Ohio, we don't have a lot of teeth when it comes to aquatic invasive species. So our approach is we just want you to do something. So if it's not required by law, by golly, if you're a clean marina, we're going to work with you to make sure you're doing something in order for you to fly the flag and tout yourself as being an environmentally friendly marina. We cover about 3,900 square miles of water. Again, that's from the Ohio River up to Lake Erie and all the inland reservoirs. We have about 312 miles of Lake Erie shoreline along the Great Lakes. And our main underlying mission and purpose is to improve water quality and wildlife habitat. Our sister program that we have under the Ohio Clean Marinas program is the Ohio Clean Boater program. This is a kind of an offshoot where we have about 350 marinas in the state of Ohio, and we have about 600 to 700,000 boaters. Certainly not every boater docks at a clean marina, and something we were realizing in our outreach years ago at boat shows and what have you was that even if we're working at marinas to implement best practices and provide boater education, we are certainly not reaching all boaters this way. So the Clean Boater program is a much less stringent initiative, but that still, is a method to get outreach and education to boaters. And we specifically have a pledge associated with the program. I've gone back and forth with talking to folks across the country over the years about this, but many people have outreach events, right? You might have a booth or a display table, and you may talk to somebody and say, "Oh, do you take steps to prevent the spread of invasive species?" And they may say, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, I always do. I always clean my boat off." And there's a 50-50 chance that that's true, or that they actually will follow through based on what education you give them. What we found scientifically is if you actually require someone in order to get a giveaway or, for spending time with you to sign a pledge, and not only sign a pledge, but in our pledge, we actually have check boxes that the people have to say. We have things related to aquatic invasive species, but we'll also have a checkbox for, do you throw your trash away? Do you make sure you have a trash can on board to minimize waste going into our waterways? Do you fuel up properly? Do you take steps such as clean, drain, dry to prevent the spread of invasive species? So what people do when we're at a booth and we either have a paper version or a tablet electronic version of our pledge, they have to physically check off the best practices that they pledge to follow, and they put their signature on. What we found is scientifically there's a greater chance that someone will actually commit to do an action if they truly stop to think about what they're doing and physically sign off on something. So we've taken that science to heart. We do require that if somebody's going to be a clean boater and part of our program that they have to fill out that pledge. We voluntarily collect emails if they are willing to give them to us, and then we have a quarterly newsletter that we send out to all of our clean boaters in our listserv that sends reminders, seasonal reminders. Such as spring, we might be talking about boat shrink wrap recycling with them getting their boats uncovered. As we go into summer, we'll do a lot more on invasive species and reminders. We'll send videos, content, what have you. So that's kind of our two sister programs. Some of the specific best practices that we have related to invasive species, and this is where I will say, if you have a clean marina program in your state, I would definitely recommend, connecting with them, do an audit of their checklist. If they aren't already, see if there's a way they can incorporate recommendations or requirements for their marinas to implement best practices for aquatic invasive species. So for our checklist, we don't necessarily require it, but we have different tiers. We have a base, a gold, and a platinum. So all of our platinum level certified clean marinas in Ohio are meeting every one of our practices, including providing education to their boaters on aquatic invasive species. And if they have a boat ramp, putting up a boat ramp sign and training their staff to remind their boaters and anglers as they come off the dock to clean, drain, dry. For boater best practices, we also have kind of rack cards and an online YouTube series, as well as reminders through our newsletter. So we'll do education to the boaters themselves, and then we'll pass along these best practices and educational tools to our marinas, asking them to send them out in their newsletters on their Facebook page if we're able to come and give a talk to their boaters. So essentially what this is an existing program that is present. There's about 26, I believe, legitimate certified clean marina programs across the country. It's an existing mechanism that exists to, saying that a lot of times, that functions to provide environmental education, sustainable training resources, and a conduit to marinas that are already invested in clean water and being a sustainable business. And so if you're able to link up with some of those clean marina programs as a partner, there's a greater chance that they'll be willing to work with you and hopefully, you know, work on boater best practices to help prevent the spread of invasive species. The next thing I'm going to talk about here is our foray into the Great Lakes Aquatic Invasive Species Blitz that was mentioned earlier. This is an initiative from the Great Lakes Commission that is international in the Great Lakes, and it functions as a primary purpose being, using the word blitz, a specific time period, in the case of this year being June 29th through July 12th of 2026, where there's focused outreach that occurs at public boat ramps and sometimes private boat ramps in our state to raise awareness about preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. The concept is, if every state participates across the Great Lakes, hopefully during the very busy season at the end of June over July 4th weekend in the United States, there's a good chance that some boater is going to be out at a boat ramp, hopefully, and intersect with an outreach contact to learn about why invasive species are an issue and how boaters can help prevent their spread, and in many cases actively preventing the spread by receiving some resources and doing an inspection right there at the boat ramp. So for Ohio, and I will pause here and kind of backtrack a little bit, many of you may know this, but for those of you that don't know, to my knowledge, I haven't done recent research, but as of 6 months ago, we were the least regulated state in the Great Lakes when it comes to aquatic invasive species. We do not even have a regulation on boaters having to pull their drain plug on their live well and their bilge when they leave a boat ramp. Unfortunately, and I'm speaking for this for myself, but we've got some major issues in Ohio that we've had for a long time, such as harmful algal blooms and some other challenges. And a lot of our state dollars have gone to that. And so we have very little resources and little to no regulatory kind of teeth in Ohio to address aquatic invasive species or their transport. So Ohio Sea Grant and our DNR and a lot of our other regional partners, really our tools that we have are boater education. And so when this invasive species landing blitz effort came out from the Great Lakes Commission, I think we really jumped on it because it helped enhance whatever we had in our toolbox to be able to try to prevent the spread of invasive species in Ohio. So back when this first started, it was right around when COVID happened. And our first foray was we were not able to get kind of a group of people to be willing to go out at boat ramps publicly and do outreach to boaters. But what we did this first year was, and we found it's a helpful resource even down the road, we brought together a number of public, private, and nonprofit entities in the state of Ohio who were doing something on aquatic invasive species. And we held a live and recorded webinar so that if boaters and marinas and interested members of the public in Ohio wanted to know what Ohio was doing to help with the AIS prevention, here's kind of a roundup of what we were doing. So that was kind of the first foray that we had into the Great Lakes Aquatic Invasive Species Landing Blitz, just getting a handle on what was going on, who was doing what. The next year, we were still kind of restricted on, honestly, staffing and capacity. And so what we did was worked with ODNR to host a live webinar series that was done through Teams. And we had it both terrestrial and aquatic, but it was actually very well attended. There was a lot of even like homeschool groups and summer school groups that would log on and learn from some of our subject matter experts on aquatic invasive species. So you found that that helped with the momentum and public awareness around why they should care about aquatic invasive species and what they can do to help. So that was the second one. A couple years went by, and there is a aquatic invasive species landing blitz grant that's out there meant to be for smaller watershed groups and other lake organizations to help them hold one of these one or several outreach events around the landing blitz at public boat ramps. We had little to no success in getting smaller groups in Ohio. We don't really have existing lake associations that do boater inspections. We don't have the structure or the funding or any of the framework for that. And so in this past year, 2025, the approach that we took was Ohio Sea Grant applied for a larger pot of money, and we acted as a statewide facilitator, pulling in any and all partners that we could to do boater outreach in that time frame. So our model, just as an idea, if there are any other states out there or people that are struggling with boater outreach in certain areas where you don't have staffing or an existing boat inspection program, essentially, Ohio Sea Grant functioned as a statewide facilitator. We coordinated a spring training webinar where we invited all of our ODNR naturalists. We found that many of our naturalists already had a passion for invasive species. They already were intercepting boaters at some of their outreach events and like summer activities. And so we capitalized on that. We actually trained a number of our webinars at our state parks to incorporate invasive species prevention into their existing educational programming. So we got a lot, I think we got 15 naturalists across the state of Ohio that participated in this effort, got training from us. We actually gave them aquatic invasive species attack packs, which are little great portable invasive species education kits. We, during the webinar, got all of our partners, naturalists and beyond, on the same page on consistent messaging to make sure that we're all on the same page on key, quick, consistent, clean, drain, dry messages for our boaters, no matter where they were in the state. We planned ahead for when we need to get social media out. We did a statewide press release. We also asked for the commitment. If we were going to help support them and facilitate this group, we asked them to sign on to this formally, as a partner and to stay involved in the effort. On the back end of this grant and this effort, what we did was we developed outreach materials. We actually put together a Tupperware container that I've called the AIS Landing Blitz Kit. And now we distributed that out during the grant, and now all of our partners from last year have their kit, and they can use it again this year if hopefully they continue to participate. But we put the attack pack, a bunch of aquatic invasive species outreach materials, some outreach supplies for boaters like grabbers, towels, chamois, all kinds of stuff. And the idea is that kind of using this opportunity to beef up our network of educators across Ohio that can hopefully intercept boaters at either outreach events or at boat ramps. So the next couple slides that I'm going to share with you, this is our, I want to be mindful of time, this is our infographic from last year. Again, we have up until 2020 very little public outreach going on about aquatic invasive species. So for us to go from very little outreach events to reaching 12 water bodies, having 5 invasive species inspections conducted, we had nothing before. So we're hoping we can build this up, keep building momentum every year, keep adding on partners every year, and really significantly increase our boater outreach through this mechanism. This is just kind of a snapshot of our spread across Ohio. We were really intentional that we weren't just doing this in the Great Lakes watershed, because we have a number of boaters that will, and paddlers especially, that will travel all across the state. And so we want to make sure we had coverage from the Ohio River to Lake Erie. I'm just going to share a couple slides here of examples I'm hoping to share with you that are maybe non-traditional or outside of the box in terms of boater outreach. So this was at a public boat ramp with our local soil and water conservation district. Typically they work with the ag sector, but we were able to work with them to come out to a boat ramp, get outreach to the public and get their name out there, help us staff a booth. And it was a local trusted name that enabled us, the people that were already in the area, to say, oh, hi, how you doing? And then let them know that we were talking about aquatic invasive species and trying to get the public, the locals there, to commit to making a difference there. This was at the Ohio State Fair. So we got ODNR to, and forgive me, this is at the Ohio State Fair, and then also a downtown Cleveland, like, public paddling race that happened. But these are kind of, again, non-traditional. They're not at boat ramps, but the idea was having a booth talking about invasive species. We actually had a little kiddie pool full of fake goldfish and fake plants that we had the kids use grabbers, and just trying to, again, reach audiences that you might not intercept all boaters here. It'll be a mix of people, but just getting awareness out there about the importance of aquatic invasive species. We have about 1 million people come to the Ohio State Fair every year. So on a daily basis, we were reaching hundreds of people with this outreach, with this visibility, getting that clean, drain, dry message out there. These are, again, kind of not at boat ramps. This was a large Ohio River Paddle Fest that brought thousands of people from all across the greater Cincinnati region and other states to come for a paddling event. We set up a booth there, tried to intercept, put language in their messaging to their paddlers about clean, drain, dry. And then this was at a Lake Erie outreach event at the islands that we have in Ohio, but was, again, meant to be, hey, there's a lot of tourists that come from out of town. They may or may not be trailing their boat. They may or may not be planning to bring their boat here at another time. And so we're trying to reach these people in kind of non-traditional, non-boat ramp methods to talk about invasive species. This next one was at a fishing tournament. I know a while ago we had in the Great Lakes a really focused effort doing outreach at fishing tournaments. So we used the Great Lakes Landing Blitz as a way to reinvigorate our connections with our local fishing tournaments. Get there at the weigh-in, get there at the times when a lot of the anglers and tournament anglers are coming in, and try and talk to them about where they're from, where they're going, why they need to be mindful when they're going to a new body of water. And then finally, these are a couple additional just thoughts and ideas for clean marina, using clean marinas for invasive species outreach. These were existing, this one was at our state park marinas. They have existing naturalist programming, maybe learn to paddle events. And we simply asked if we could have a booth there, talk to clean boaters, promote our clean boater program, but tie in aquatic invasive species outreach while we're there. This next one is getting a little bit further along with our clean marinas, is to actual action to address invasive species. The one on the left is a boat ramp sign. We worked with the ODNR. Ohio Sea Grant applied for a grant to purchase signs and signposts, and then we worked with our watercraft officers to distribute those signs and get them installed at public boat ramps across Ohio. So just collaboration, working together. We also had our first pilot. Again, we're way behind, I know, in the Great Lakes, but our first pilot, kind of a CD3 boat cleaning station at one of our state park marinas that we're hoping will be a pilot that other facilities can follow. So last bit of information that I want to share with you. So that was my kind of clean marina, clean boater Sea Grant hat. Another role that I play is kind of working as part of some national groups on where aquatic invasive species prevention can tie in with the boating industry. So a couple things to be aware of. There was an Aquatic Invasive Species Commission that was put together largely by Boat US Foundation and other partners recently. I think not much has come out of this yet, but to me, policy is a place to start. And then you at least have a framework and something to turn to when you're trying to push either elected officials or decision makers to make changes and work on actual action. So this is something that exists. Another great resource is from the Boat US Foundation. They have a clean, drain, dry 3D model meant for exemplifying kind of setting up a place and a space for aquatic invasive species inspection and prevention. So the way I see it is I'm hopeful that some boaters may come across this if they have Boat US insurance, and the Boat US Foundation is kind of the nonprofit education-based arm of the Boat US company. And then finally, the American Boat and Yacht Council has been through several iterations of design guidance for AIS prevention. What this basically means is the marine manufacturing industry looking at redesigning how they build vessels so that vessels are intentionally designed to minimize the possibility for nooks and crannies, areas where there could be a greater risk of invasive species spread. So that's been a long time in the works, and something that I think ABYC has put out as a standard in hopes that obviously not vessels that are 50 years old, but newer vessels that are being built, that they have that design standard in mind as they're building new designs of vessels. And then finally, many of you may be aware of the state's Organization for Boating Access. They regularly provide grants for boat ramps and building public access for boating. But what you may not know is they actually have some guidance on designing boat ramps intentionally with aquatic invasive species prevention in mind. So just sharing that there's those great resources out there that are helpful. A lot of different organizations and industry that are interested in this. And again, I know we have a long way to go in Ohio, but we're doing everything and anything we can with the tools that we have to try and advance this issue. So thank you for your time, Doug. I'm going to minimize my screen here. I haven't been looking at the chat to see if there's anything there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, Ohio's been a great partner in aquatic invasive species prevention, but obviously been limited with lack of authority and not a lot of capacity or resources to be able to dedicate to AIS. But what you have been doing a terrific job of integrating that in and getting the messages out to the public.
Absolutely. Oh yes. Okay, I'm looking at some of the questions now.
Yep. Folks are asking if you could put the links that you provided in the chat after you're done.
I can definitely do that. And then the other question was for what was in the attack packs. That's a great question. And you can definitely make these yourself. So we had a series of placards. They were kind of, rather than laminated, we made them like a hard plastic with the printed material on it so that they're very durable for all sorts of outreach, right? In the field, at the state fair when kids, who knows what, and you want to wipe it off when they're done. But we had placards of, I would say 6 to 8 different aquatic invasive species. The key is that they're relevant to your area. So I would say for your specific region, look at building a set of, and they're essentially mini fact sheets. But the key was it had a picture of the organism. It had a brief sentence on where it came from. It had some information on why it mattered. Why do we care that these invasive species are, in our case, in the Great Lakes? And then most importantly, it had a little factoid on how you can help. So we would have those placards out. Not only were they helpful to have at outreach events, but they were helpful for training, because the naturalists, if they weren't as familiar with aquatic invasive species or a certain species, they would have that as a resource, right? So they could always look at that if somebody's like, well, what about sea lamprey? They could say, hang on, and the resource is right there. There's guidance there. And then what was really cool about the attack packs is we actually had acrylic preserved samples of aquatic invasive species. It just provides that visual, and in some places that tactile educational opportunity, especially with youth, where you can visually see the aquatic invasive species, help learn about it, help understand scale, size, what have you. And we've been using those. I mean, Doug, we've been using those for a long time in the Sea Grant Network. And
Yep.
many of our states have them available for loan. So if you are out here, feel free to reach out to a Sea Grant contact, and you might be able to get one for loan.
Yep, the genesis, I think it predates you even, Sarah, but the genesis
Yes.
behind the attack pack comes from Wisconsin. And we had traveling trunks that were available, but they were rather expensive to construct. And so the attack packs were intended to be a much cheaper version. And the intent for teaching was for high school students to take those attack packs and to teach middle school students. But they can also be used by teachers in a variety of different, formal, non-formal, and informal education settings.
Our decision we made, if it's helpful for anyone that's with a DNR, we made the decision to give at least we spent some additional money, got more, and we formally gave one attack pack per region. We kind of have our naturalists and our parks divided up into 5 regions here in Ohio. So each region has like a lead naturalist. And so that person is the one that's in charge, and they have that. We sent that out to the entire network. And so that way they know if they want to borrow it, even outside of the landing blitz, that they have that as a resource. So we've kind of set that up as, again, there's only so many of us. So that way that broadens our network and our reach. Yeah.
Fantastic. Anybody out there that would like to come off mute? We still have time for questions.
We do have a question in the chat. And this, do you have any experience with wake boats and the risk to your waters as they carry water from lake to lake?
Yeah, so that's been a big point of discussion, I think, during many of these American Boat and Yacht Council groups that are designing boats and talking about that. I personally don't have experience with specific best practices that we're doing, but I imagine there's many states that do, and I would say it's a significant concern. I also know that this is just my 2 cents. There's even some, I don't want to say tension, but the wake boating group in general is it's been around for a while, but it's a newer group in terms of the boating community. Like in my experience in working with marinas in Ohio, you've got your sailboats, you've got your power boats, and those have always been kind of the 2 main communities, and you've got your paddlers. And the wake boat community is this like new and different. And so even I think getting them to have a seat at the table and having, because we'll have these sailing organizations, we'll have a marine trades group that'll have representation. And what I am personally seeing is just those folks are not even at the table, and they really should be. Rather than being talked about, they should be a part of the discussion and helping to find solutions together. So I think there's, at least here in Ohio, there's some progress that needs to be made there. Because I think they're somewhat isolated as a group. And to me, if you're going to be successful with a long-term behavior change with those types of audiences, you need to involve them rather than tell them what to do. They need to be involved in the decision-making process. But that's just my 2 cents. Feel free, anybody else, to chime in on wake boats.
Any follow-up questions or comments to that?
Yeah.
I have a
I'll just-
follow-up
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
about the wake boats. So
Mhm.
I agree that we should invite them to the table. Does anybody here have a suggestion on how that invitation can work?
Hmm. It might be best to go through, and I'm going to pause my screen sharing, so I'm not sharing. I'm thinking about the National Marine Manufacturers Association, that they might be a good, because they would be the people that might have the contacts for all the major boat manufacturers, and could give, to me, it'd be starting with the actual companies that are making these vessels and say, how do you know, are you aware of your design being this way? Is there any way we can talk about, an improved design, or, so that'd be one method is top down. The other method would be to perhaps look at, I'm trying to think if there's regional boating groups that would be represented from those boaters. Like for example, there's American Paddling Association. So I imagine there's a wake boat association. I see somebody else has raised their hand.
Yeah, let's go to Adam because he's been involved with ABYC and with the National Marine Manufacturers Association. Adam?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Doug. I was just going to chime in and say, so I am the co-chair for the ABYC committee that does the standard for boat design with regard to aquatic invasive species. It just went through another round of revision, and we are meeting either later this week or early next week to
have it on my calendar. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that one's next week. So not a ton of comments on that one. And then also, yes, I've worked with the Water Sports Industry Association in the past, predominantly with Mastercraft and Nautique, and it's a challenging thing because I've met with them and sort of acted as a consultant to try to brainstorm manufacturing changes regarding ballast equipment, from even like pulling heated water through the engine into the tanks. Like they've brainstormed a variety of things, and they ultimately kind of fall to the side, I think, or I haven't seen anybody do those steps yet because of the varied jurisdictions that exist out there, and potentially what they want with maybe bypassing a decon in Tahoe versus a decon in Minnesota or Wisconsin or Ohio. Like there's just that challenge to deal with. They have, however, the WSIA created, and those of you that work with the inspection programs, they contacted all of the wake boat manufacturers and got a variety of schematics from them, and they have an app that's available online. It's not really an app, it's more of a website, but all of our inspectors have that, and that's a way for them to look up a specific boat and get decontamination. Thank you, Jessamine. She just put it in the chat, but that's a way to at least provide trained inspectors tools to take a look at schematics for a specific watercraft. So while we don't have a silver bullet yet regarding the water itself, they have been making strides over the last number of years to help improve with us.
Adam.
Thanks, Adam, for your comments. Adam, can you say a word about retrofitting existing boats? What's the status of that?
WakeWorks probably is still the only one that is out there that retrofits, and that's WakeWorks owns a product called Mussel Master, which some of you may be familiar with. It's essentially a filter that goes into the fill line. I think Mastercraft or Nautique, I haven't looked in a while. One of them was kind of providing it as an upgrade option on watercraft, and it's also available, or at least it has been in the past, from WakeWorks, WakeWorks, the company. I think it's gotten some decent use in some clearer waters. It remains to be seen how a filter like that would be effective in hypereutrophic lakes and lakes with a ton of algae as far as filter performance. But that's the main one that I'm aware of as far as retrofitting.
Yeah, that's my recollection too, Adam, and that company's out of Florida, right?
Yes.
Yep, that's the one I was thinking of. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Got a couple more minutes for comments, questions. Spencer, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thanks. I really like this discussion. And thinking about like the Great Lakes and how we all fit into these things. I guess I'm going to ask an edge case question because I'm kind of an edge case. You know, in Ottail County, we're in western Minnesota. Our water doesn't go to the Great Lakes. We're on a continental divide. Half of it goes to the Arctic and the other half goes to the Mississippi or Minnesota River, and kind of rural in general. And maybe even if I can make a joke, kind of Western Dakota or East Dakota, Western Minnesota, East Dakota. So where would a county like us, like sort of a border state, fit in? Like I don't really consider myself a Great Lakes area. Am I like the Western what is it called? The Western Commission of Water, Doug. Western States Alliance, is that what it's called? But we're kind of, and I'm thinking about other counties too that are kind of like border counties. Like what group should we, I guess, gravitate to, if you're sort of a bridge? Thanks.
Sorry, Spencer, was that directed towards question
Oh,
towards
this
Sarah?
is,
Or
it was sort of towards Sarah, but it was also just towards
Okay.
the group or you too. Just
Oh,
thinking about,
gotcha.
yeah, just where, when you have like sort of, when you're on like a teeter-totter of who you partner with, and think about your
Sure.
audience too, right? I mean, are the boaters in Western Minnesota thinking so much about the Great Lakes and Lake Superior as they are going to like Lake Sakakawea or Lake Mead or things like that? So,
Okay.
how
Yeah.
do these look?
Sorry about that. I'm not familiar with the area, so I was gonna see if I could look it up on a map. So I'm not sure if I can give you your exact jurisdiction and technically where your watershed drains to, but my personal recommendation would be to really think locally. I mean, if you are seeing an aquatic invasive species that is in your water body and that same aquatic invasive species is found in the Great Lakes, I would say that's a potential vector, and that's where you might want to focus your efforts on transport from there. On the other hand, if it's an aquatic invasive species that maybe isn't as abundant in the Great Lakes, but is more in the Western states, and that's, so it's maybe doing a little bit of sleuthing to find out truly like what's the most relevant watershed that you think is impacting your local water body. And there's nothing wrong with doing outreach for both, but right, you got to kind of pick and choose your battles. So I would say focus on the one that's most, prioritize the one that's most impactful that you're seeing, these invasive species come from. That'd be my recommendation. But I'll also just add this, and I don't want to belabor the point, but one of the biggest things I found as an aquatic invasive species educator is that sometimes, especially a scientist, gets too caught up on a specific invasive or a specific area, when at the end of the day, the most important thing is behavior change. So however you can reach your audience, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about zebra mussels or the next invasive. Talk about the fact that if you focus on clean, drain, dry, and if you implement these practices, okay, you might not prevent the one that's already there, but you're going to prevent the next invasive species. So focus on the get in the habit. I make the analogy of the same way that hopefully years ago everybody got the messaging and cut the 6-pack rings to prevent animals getting entangled. You didn't know particularly what animals were getting entangled, but everybody did it, right? You should have gotten in the habit of doing that with your pop cans. We should all be getting in the habit of clean, drain, dry, regardless of what you're talking about. So that's the main mission. Just my 2 cents there. And then I'll end with, by all means, if there's additional chats, happy, and Doug, I'll let you do the timing. But the other thing, as down the road, I had a talk last week with one of our major boat dealers, and we are throwing around the idea of what we're going to call a Clean Boater Partner program. And the concept would be working with dealers and providing a kind of a certification where they could put a decal in their dealer window. And this could be REI, Cabela's, all the way to your regular boat dealers, to say, do you provide clean boating education, which would include invasive species, but do you provide a pamphlet? Do you, at point of sale, do you provide education to your boaters on clean boating? And if so, could we certify you for being a clean boating partner? So we're going to try and go down that route in Ohio. It's probably a few years in the works, but by all means, anybody else could do the same and pilot something in your state, because I think that is also a missed opportunity for boater education, is that dealer, point of sale. So, but I'll pause there.
thank you so much for that, Sarah. And thank you so much for your terrific presentation. Also, again, thank you, Lisa, for your presentation as well. We are going to go on a break. We're just a couple minutes behind. That's just fine. We built in a little extra time. So it's 2:33. So let's get back together at 2:38. Both Sarah and Lisa, you're welcome to rejoin us if you'd like to learn about golden mussels and the Stop Starry program here in Minnesota. Thanks so much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is now 2:38. Looks like we still have a good number attending. Oh, let's admit Ariana. So our next speaker is on the threats of golden mussels in California and across the nation, really. So we have Tom Jensen from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, no relation, by the way. So Tom, if you're ready, go ahead and share your screen. Oh, there you are. Great.
Sounds good. Thanks, Doug. Can you guys hear me okay?
Sure can. Yep. Loud and clear. Look good.
Alrighty, thank you for having me. And good afternoon. My name is Thomas Jensen. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in the invasive species program. Martha Volkoff is our program manager and has been kind of leading the charge on this golden mussel effort. I've been with the invasive species program for about 5 years now. And ever since the introduction of golden mussel, we've been on a bit of emergency response in handling everything and doing the best that we can. So to give you some background on golden mussels, they're native to China and Southeast Asia. They've been introduced to different parts of the world, Hong Kong, Japan, and South America. And nearly all California fresh and brackish waters are suitable for establishment. As Lisa touched on earlier, they require significantly less calcium in the water to complete their life cycle in order for veliger development and adult survival. And so, unlike what we've seen with dry-scented mussels, where they need 12 to 15 milligrams per liter of calcium, golden mussel really just need somewhere in the single digits, around 3 milligrams per liter to complete that life cycle. And so there's a lot of waters in the state and in the nation that were not suitable habitat for dry-scented mussels that would be potentially suitable habitat for golden mussel. And that presents a really big threat and a little bit of a different management strategy that we need to employ some of these different water managers that had previously not been concerned too much about dry-scented mussel introductions because of their water chemistry. And here's a photo of California Department of Water Resources monitoring equipment, the first golden mussel detection from October 2024. So while there's no way to confirm this, they likely arrived through the commercial shipping pathway. And the state of California, through the California State Lands Commission, does have ballast water protocols and practices in place to mitigate and reduce the risk of invasive species introduction. But as we know, it's impossible to completely eliminate that risk. And so they were likely introduced through that commercial shipping pathway into the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta and then have spread from there. Just to touch on their life cycle, it's very similar to dry-scented mussels. Their lifespan is 2 to 4 years. They're broadcast spawners and have a high reproductive potential. They have free-floating planktonic larvae, those veligers, in the water column, and they typically take 11 to 20 days for development, depending on water temperature and water chemistry, before they settle into juvenile mussels. And their impacts are similar to dry-scented mussels as well. They can have environmental impacts on native species, ecosystem communities, and system-wide health. Certainly impacts to recreation. I'll touch on that in just a minute. Impacts to water infrastructure, so dams, pumping plants, hydropower, and here in California, some of those things public safety related, being flood control and fire protection and water quality and security, and all of those touching on economic impacts for the state. And so this is a really big threat, and due to the location of the introduction, one that has presented some different challenges than we were used to than with dry-scented mussels. And to cover some of the pathways of spread of golden mussel. So here is a map of the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, and they can travel, drift in interconnected waters on or in watercraft or in water equipment, potentially on wildlife, on plants, things like that. And so this system is all connected to several water conveyance projects that in California that bring water from Northern California to Southern California. The Central Valley Project, operated by U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and the State Water Project, operated by California Department of Water Resources. You can see this conveyance infrastructure here. For the Central Valley Project, conveys water from reservoirs in Northern California down through the Sacramento Delta and then down to the Central Valley of California. And that State Water Project is similar, bringing water from reservoirs in Northeast California, bringing that water down through the Delta and then down through the Central Valley to Southern California. And so that water flowing from north to south with detections, with the first detection in the Delta, everything downstream of the Delta that receives untreated, infested state Delta water is presumed infested. So that's components of the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project. And so when we get new detections, one of the first things we look at is if they receive water, untreated water from the Delta, from these systems. And here's a map of our current distribution of golden mussel. Lisa showed the USGS NAS map on her presentation, and that map is the same map as this one. This is the detection map from our CDFW Invasive Species Program website, where we publish our confirmed sightings of golden mussel in the state. But we also send those to USGS, Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species website, and they maintain their distribution map as well. So if you're interested in following the golden mussel distribution and new detections, you can sign up for notifications on the USGS NAS website, and they'll send out notifications when a new detection is made in the state. So this cluster of dots here around San Francisco is that Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, where that initial detection was. And since then, we have documented golden mussel detection spread down the way through these water conveyance projects, through the Central Valley and down into Southern California, reservoirs in Southern California that are all interconnected and receive that same untreated, potentially infested water. And so to date, there have been no detections outside the flow of Delta water. So we have not documented overland spread of golden mussel to date, which is important in controlling that pathway of overland spread by watercraft, by primarily recreational watercraft or paddlecraft. And I just wanted to touch on some of the real impacts we've seen in the past year and a half of detecting golden mussels. So this is a piece of Department of Water Resources. It's a piece of equipment that's in the water, an acoustic Doppler current profiler. And it was checked in October 2024, and it was mussel free. And at some point between then and August 2025, they were having trouble with the equipment readings and collecting readings. So they went out there to check it in August 2025 and found it fully encrusted with golden mussel. So you can see that that's the photo on the left there when they went out to check it when they were having trouble with the readings it was collecting. It's completely encrusted with golden mussel. And the photo on the right is what that equipment is supposed to look like. That photo was taken after all of the golden mussels were removed from the equipment and it was functioning properly, but now requires some sort of maintenance and schedule to keep it mussel free and functioning properly. And there's a ton of other structures like this and equipment and whatnot in infested water that are susceptible to ongoing maintenance in order to maintain function. Here are the louvers at Department of Water Resources Skinner Fish Facility. These are used to stop fish from entering the pumps that feed the California Aqueduct, which is part of that water conveyance system I described previously. And you can see here golden mussels starting to encrust the surfaces of these louvers. And these also require frequent maintenance and cleaning to maintain function for the state water project. And so surfaces like these provide a great substrate for golden mussels because they're dark with minimal sunlight, have nice corners, and just tons of available room for growth of these dense golden mussel colonies. And as I mentioned, we have not documented overland spread of golden mussel to unconnected waterways from that system, which I think is big, and we'll see what this next monitoring season brings with boating. But another pathway of spread is settled adults and subadults on watercraft or in watercraft or free floating villagers in entrapped water on that watercraft. And well, I'll touch on some of the watercraft that we've seen from coming out of the Delta recently. And so these photos were collected by California State Parks Division of Boating and Waterways, and just goes to show that these mussels are starting to foul watercraft that are moored in the Delta. And those moored watercraft in the Delta present a very high risk of introduction to other unconnected waterways if they're pulled and trailered elsewhere to a waterway that does not have a boat inspection program. And this presents a few different impacts, certainly an impact to the boater for maintenance and cleaning of their watercraft, but is now a potential vector for spread if they leave the Delta and travel to a new water body and are not decontaminated properly beforehand. So we have found, thanks to California Department of Water Resources, they have some preliminary research showing that the decontamination protocols that we use for dry scented mussels, so that being the hot water spray for 10 seconds for the exterior boats and flushing of engine compartments and things like that at the required temperatures as described in I believe I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Western Regional Panel uniform minimum protocols and standards, but in that document describes the decontamination standards for dry scented mussel that many of the Western states employ. And those are effective for golden mussel, which is good news. And I wanted to highlight the fact that, we are seeing watercraft leaving infested waters, watercraft that are fouled by golden mussel, have adults attached to the hull, potentially villagers in entrapped water. We're seeing those watercraft be trailered from the Delta to other water bodies. And this is definitely a pathway that we're working on addressing and interrupting and trying to manage to stop the spread of golden mussel within California and to other Western states. And so at these different reservoirs listed here, Lake Berryessa, Lake McCloud, Folsom Lake, Lake Oroville, and Tahoe, those are all places that have intercepted watercraft that have had golden mussel attached. And the map here is from Colorado Parks and Wildlife Watercraft Inspection and Decontamination Data Sharing Database, or the WID app, which is what many, I know many states use to document watercraft inspection and decontamination. This data was pulled in 2024 to show, to show where watercraft were traveling to after they boated in the Delta. And you can see that it's not just California water bodies, but I mean, primarily the go-to spots or California water bodies, but there are some watercraft that were boating in the Delta and left California to go boat in other places. And so this just very much highlights the need to manage that those watercraft moving out of the Delta. And sorry, maybe I should have described that previously, but currently there's no management of watercraft launching in the Delta, so people can come and go as they please, and those that have moored vessels there can have them moored for some time and then pull them from the water and travel to a different water body. And so in California, CDFW does not manage the waters. We have many different water managers that are responsible for their respective managing their respective waters. And so whether that's federal, state, or local agencies, or private owners, things like that, municipalities, counties, there are many different water managers in California. So those that manage uninfested waters are required to have a prevention program in place to prevent the introduction of invasive mussels. Now, some do, some don't have a program in place. And then those that do have a program in place, some of them do employ watercraft inspection before launch. And so many of the larger reservoirs that can afford to put on those watercraft inspection programs have stood those up, especially with the new detection of golden mussel. But all of them have their own process and standards and bans. And so when many of these water managers at uninfested water stood up these inspection programs, it sort of shut down recreational boating last season, or the opportunity for boaters to go to different water bodies without interrupting their normal schedule, I guess I would say. And so many of these programs required a 30-day dry time for watercraft before launching. And then once they were launched in that water body, they could, if they wanted to go to a different water body, they'd have to break that seal on the watercraft, go to a different water body, and then abide by that regulatory water manager's requirements in order to launch there. And so right now in California, we don't have a system in place to essentially have some sort of reciprocal banding between water managers to increase recreational opportunity for boaters. And so that's something the department is working on facilitating and coordinating right now between water managers in order to sort of balance increasing recreational boating opportunity for boaters, while at the same time mitigating this potential spread and mitigating the vector of overland transport via watercraft for golden mussel to uninfested water bodies. And those water managers that operate reservoirs open to boating that are infested with mussels are required to have control plans. So those plans are outlined for those waters in order to contain and control the spread out from those waters, and try and eliminate or reduce any water leaving those infested waters. And in response to golden mussel, the Golden Mussel Task Force was created, the lead agency being California Department of Fish and Wildlife, but we have many other federal, state, and local partners involved with the task force. Department of Water Resources has been a great partner, and they've been conducting a lot of research on golden mussel And that is not published yet, but they have shared preliminary results at several different meetings, the Western Regional Panel meeting in last October, I believe. And so they're doing great work on the research front for golden mussel, and many of our partners are as well. So the way the task force is set up is we have these different teams. The lead steering committee guiding the task force, and we have these teams comprised of well, that mainly stem from the golden mussel response framework that was published by this task force. And so the response framework outlined our state's plan to address golden mussel in California. And with that, there were several different objectives in there. For example, outreach and education, media, golden prevention, containment, statewide monitoring, and things like that. And so we have many different teams that are part of the golden mussel task force. And I touched on prevention at uninfested waters. And so those water managers control the access to those their respective water bodies. So facilitating that coordination between water bodies is difficult, but we're hoping to get there this boating season in order to bring back that recreation for Californians, while at the same time preventing the spread of golden mussel. And one component of those prevention plans for water managers at uninfested waters is conducting mussel monitoring to ensure that their waters are not infested. So we provide minimum recommendations for mussel monitoring, and we're in the process of updating those to be reflective of all invasive mussels, so including golden mussel biology. And as I touched on, one of the teams on the golden mussel task force is the outreach and education team. And so this team is responsible for developing an outreach plan, targeting specific audiences and different ways to engage those audiences and get the message out of this clean, drain, dry message to stop the spread of mussels in California. And really working with our partners to develop and to develop consistent messaging between our departments and reaching different audiences that we have. And I think we've been successful in some parts here, and we've identified some areas that we want to work on in 2026. Another team on that task force is a science and capacity building team. And so this is the team working on golden mussel research, maintaining a list of research needs, and many of our partners are looking into these different research needs. Sorry, excuse me. Golden mussel villager identification, villager survival in entrapped water, lethal conditions for decontamination, adult and villager salinity tolerance, copper toxicities, equinox toxicity, UV light as a treatment option. And so a lot of these are being looked into now, and in order to inform golden mussel management in California. And I should add that it isn't just California entities looking at these research needs. We have partners across the U.S. Helping conduct this golden mussel research. And so I want to end this kind of highlight on golden mussels with just a call to action. So certainly spread the word and concern about golden mussel, because I'm sure that there are water bodies in your area that are not susceptible to dry scented mussels, but have suitable water chemistry that would be susceptible to golden mussel. And so just knowing that it is a threat and keeping an eye out for golden mussel in the field for any biofouling bivalves and reporting them to your state's aquatic invasive species coordinator immediately. And lastly, promoting and implementing the clean, drain, dry message to all audiences. I think that's really prevention is key, and that's really the point we're driving home with golden mussel in order to stop the spread to overland to any uninfested waters. So I wanted to just take the remainder of the time here and answer your guys' questions about golden mussel, or just have a discussion of how things are going. So thank you for your time, and I'll take questions or any comments you have. And it looks like there are a couple in the chat.
Yep. Thank you very much, Tom. Go ahead if you want to take those as you wish. I did answer number 3 from Spencer.
Sounds good. Thank you. The first question: in California, is there a universal drain plug law? Plug out while transporting watercraft on public roads. There's not an explicit law to pull your plug in California, but it is illegal to possess, import, or transport mussels in the state, and that's in statute in Fish and Game Code. And so there's that component, and it applies to adult and villagers, but I don't know if we're in the place for our law enforcement to I don't know what that dynamic is with our law enforcement to enforce that for watercraft in California. Is there any interbasin transfer of water between Great Basin, Pacific over the Sierra? Not to my knowledge. And Doug, you mentioned you answered number 3. Are there check stations when crossing Donner Pass, other mountain passes as you leave the basin? Yes. So we do have California Department of Food and Agriculture. They're a partner on the Golden Mussel Task Force as well. They operate check stations, but their main goal is checking watercraft and vehicles coming into California. And so that's one thing we're thinking about. It's one thing we have in mind is how to stop the spread in California, but also how these efforts impact other Western states and stopping the spread to any other states.
Spencer also asked another question for anyone. Is there any literature out there about zebra mussel, quagga, golden mussel interspecies competition? Will golden mussel displace zebra mussel and quagga mussel? Tom, I'd like you to chime in, but I'll make the first comment and say we don't have any evidence of here in North America where they co-occur.
Yeah, that's right. And there are a couple waters in Southern California actually that will have both quagga and golden mussel. So
Right.
that'll be interesting to document. And on top of the research needs to inform management decisions, there's also these research needs to identify what the ecological impacts will be of golden mussel in the short term, intermediate, and long term, them being here, and how they'll affect our native species and game species. And it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, and also if there are things about the California population of golden mussel that may be different in other invaded ranges.
Do we have any other questions?
Ingrid asked, or any known hybridization of mussels? Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, they're in different genera, so it's very unlikely that's going to happen. So golden mussel has been up on my radar screen for over 25 years ago when Brian Morton from the University of Hong Kong introduced us in a plenary session for an international conference, and we had our first introduction of presentations at the international conference when it was held in Duluth from a couple of Brazilians at the time, and they were characterized basically the golden mussels as zebra mussels on steroids. So it's much to be concerned about. The spread has been pretty quick in California. Both Adam Dahl and I are participating in the National ANS Task Force Golden Mussel Work Group, which is to develop a national plan on golden mussels. So if there are folks on the call here that are interested in at least learning about that or maybe joining in the group from and providing a local perspective, you're certainly welcome to do that. Any other questions or comments for Tom? We still have some time. About 5 minutes or so. Spencer put in a comment, our habitat in Otter Tail County is very conducive for zebra mussels, so I'm very concerned about overland introduction of golden mussels. Yeah, the only outreach that we've conducted here in Minnesota on golden mussel, and it's I guess clairvoyance and being omniscient, the Minnesota Invasive Species Advisory Council had the golden mussel in our 2026 invasive species calendar. So
Also, Doug, was that also, did they have to go through some DNR rulemaking to add the golden mussel to prohibited species in the last couple of years?
Yeah, the golden mussel is a prohibited species in Minnesota.
Thanks. But didn't it take some rulemaking to do that on the DNR's part? Like it wasn't like automatic.
I believe it was a rulemaking process. Yes,
Okay.
I wasn't a part of that. But
Okay. Well, I'm glad that it got added. Thanks.
Just to clarify on that, yes, any species that we add to the prohibited list goes through expedited rulemaking.
Thanks, Adam.
And I think that's great to be proactive on that, on the regulation front. We hope it doesn't get to that point, but if it ever did appear, you would have the appropriate management tools in place to respond immediately and not have to wait for emergency rulemaking and things like that.
And I might have missed this because I've been keeping an eye on the chat. But how did they get to California?
Likely through the commercial shipping pathway, ballast water.
Ballast water.
But we can't know for certain. But that's likely the pathway of introduction.
And right now, the biggest worry is for overland to start from California to other places. But is there also a worry that it can arrive through ballast water to other states?
Yeah, there is I believe the Smithsonian is looking into the potential for introduction through that commercial shipping pathway along the West Coast, and what the potential is for survivability in the marine environment shipping along the West Coast. I don't know what the results of that research were, but that is being looked into.
Okay. Yeah, just go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, there's significant commerce going up and down the west coast of all the way to British Columbia and Alaska. So there's much at risk there.
I am curious, just because I know that we have had zebra mussels for a while. I'm curious why, if there's commerce happening all the time, why maybe golden mussels took much longer compared to zebra mussels. And this is more curiosity on my side. Does anybody know?
One theory, this is just a theory and discussion, but during the that commercial shipping issue that happened with COVID, with many commercial ships being at port, them being there in fresh water for such a long time may have been a contributing factor to answer like why now, why golden mussel introduced now and not previously, and maybe it's that the protocols in place for that pathway of introduction were adequate at the time and for operating commercial shipping business as normal. But when things came to a halt, maybe some variables changed and made for the right environment for golden mussel introduction. And that's just one hypothesis in sort of discussion.
Yeah, makes sense. I see that we do have, oh, Spencer, go ahead.
Oh, it's in the chat. Are ships from Asia or from the Pacific required to exchange their ballast water before entering the inland waterways as they are in the east, like the Great Lakes? This is a question for everyone.
Yes, in the Great Lakes, all foreign vessels are required to do ballast water exchange 200 miles off the exclusive economic zone of the United States. If they don't, they're required to cap their ballast water tanks. They have to treat their ballast water tanks or go back out into the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Sure, but does that exist for like ships from the Far East coming to the United States via?
Any foreign ships that come into the Great Lakes.
Okay, but like, what if they're pulling into Los Angeles Harbor or the Sacramento Valley from Shenzhen?
Take it away, Tom.
I'm not familiar with the exact protocols in place that those commercial ships have to go through, but I do know that our State Lands Commission does have tools in place to address invasive species through that potential pathway. I don't know what the details of them are, unfortunately.
Okay,
sorry.
I'll take the answer to that question then. Since 2006, all foreign ships are required to do ballast water exchange before entering United States waters.
Okay, cool. And that's just not the Great Lakes. That's all
Correct.
waters of the United States. Okay, cool. Well, that's good.
Yep, and again, there's been no new introductions of aquatic invasive species in the Great Lakes since 2006 because commercial shippers are complying with the regulations. All right, I see that we are over time here. Thank you so much, Tom, for your presentation. That was very informative.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our email.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much. I had to turn my video off because my internet was wonky and I cut out like 3 times in a row. So we'll take my chances here. So let's move on. We'll hear about the Stop Starry program, and we have with us Sammy Selter and Jeff Forrester from the Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates. I'm not sure if you guys are doing a tag team presentation, but whoever is in the lead, take it away.
Awesome. Let's see. Am I sharing my presentation?
Yep, looks great.
Awesome. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sammy Selter. I am the Associate Executive Director of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers. With me co-presenting is Jeff Forrester. He's our Executive Director. So I lead the Stop Starry program. I'm the lead organizer. Jeff started this program, so I sort of lead our what we call civic leadership development side of things. So I'm building the relationships with folks like you and our Lake Association members. And Jeff's focus is primarily on our legislative work. So he's going to have a really good statewide kind of basis to what we're doing with Stop Starry. But just to give you a quick introduction about who we are and where we're coming from, Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates is a statewide nonprofit. Our mantra is water connects us all because we're dedicated to forging powerful links to protect Minnesota's lakes and rivers. This includes working with lakes, lake advocates, and policymakers across the state. This map shows our organization membership of lake associations, improvement districts, even some counties are members of our organization. And really our approach is that we support independent science to research lake and river impacts, We also promote education to disseminate awareness and outreach on how people can get involved in lake and river management. And we organize, as I said, these powerful links between all of the key professionals, leadership, to create this statewide effort to protect water in Minnesota. And how this is really implemented in our programs is through pilots. We form these regional collaboratives, meeting with Lake Association leaders, county coalitions, AIS coordinators, state government, tribal nations, and bringing them all together into these regional invasive species prevention pilots to share strategies for prevention, innovative control methods, and how we can collaborate to bring resources to the general public to improve that behavior change that we were talking about earlier. And so how Starry really started was really the influence of starry stonewort in the state. It came here in 2015. It was first identified in the southern half of the state. It's now currently found in about 38 lakes about a decade later. And the real issue with starry is its ability to grow these dense, stringy mats, impacting recreation, overcoming native vegetation, smothering fish habitat. So there's that ecological impact. This species can take over an entire littoral zone of a lake. And then it's also growing very rapidly against our native species. It's green under the ice. It has a long growing season from June till mid to late fall. And it also has two methods of spread. One is through the fragments of the stringy material, and then it's got these tiny, about size of a piece of rice sized white bulbils that can bury into sediment and grow back year after year. And that peaks in those bulbil productions between August and October. And the real challenge for local partners is that there is not a methodology as we have with other invasive aquatic plants to reduce and manage starry for a long-term strategy. It's very costly to control starry stonewort between mechanical and chemical harvesting. And it's often, in our heavily infested lakes, it's really a year by year by year treatment. There's not a long-term management. So bringing these partners together is also helping to identify kind of these local strategies. And then how can we bring those local strategies together to produce outcomes that prevent the spread of an aggressive aquatic invader like starry stonewort. And that is where our program really started to create its strategic plan. Looking into the research, we talked with MASERC researchers at the University of Minnesota, and some of their studies showing that even if there is signage present at the access, if there's not an inspector there, compliance drops down. And when you asked boaters in voter surveys, what is the gap? Why are we not complying? Is that it's a lack of tools when and where they need them. So our effort in Stop Starry started off with this addressing the species with containing the spread, and then using our partnership to build awareness across the state, because this is how we can influence boater behavior. If we build access to best practices through equipments like CD3 stations, boaters can have them when and where they need them. There's evidence from Hennepin County that these stations, even without an inspector, just make it easier, and therefore they're seeing more compliance where these stations are located with clean, drain, dry behavior. And increasing awareness, we had two parts to our communication strategies with Stop Starry. First was to leverage the network of folks we were bringing together and do some grassroots communications through newsletters, lake association meetings, workshops. One of our partners has a trailered unit, and they take their unit around to youth festivals. So using that kind of grassroots education to get the local community to know where these tools are. But then we are also increasing statewide awareness, supporting digital media campaigns, supporting each other in media, working with local media, getting articles out, and then working with DNR in this process so we can install these stations. That also required a great deal of work in our partnership, was identifying first using AIS Explorer to figure out where do we need to put these stations, what are the highest risk lakes for starry stonewort spread. And then we have to go and find a local partner who owns the access site and wants to take ownership of one of these pieces of equipment. And then there's often a permitting or lease to kind of the admin side of things to go through. And then installation requires a site evaluation, requires that local partners to be there, and also form partnerships potentially with the owners on long-term maintenance and annual tool tracking software. So collecting all of these people together in doing that process is what helped us build our awareness campaign, because we were able to meet these folks on the ground with this on the ground project of installing clean drain dry stations, and then learning from them, how are they going out and educating people and what do they need in that process. And so the outcomes, the project first started in 2021, and we first started launching this approach of installing clean drain dry stations in 2021. In 2022, we received a state grant to start the project, and then later on, we received funding from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund to continue to install stations on starry infested lakes. And overall, this meant that we had collaborated with over 100 different organizations in the process of installing stations, conducting outreach, and strategizing on containment on a local front. And initially, with connecting with these local partners, we had found a role for them in sharing that expertise, because as I mentioned, there's not a control strategy in place that we know of for starry stonewort. So these local partners were testing everything from diver-assisted suction harvest, benthic barriers, rapid response, doing monitoring programs, and working with the university on research to wild rice, on taking sediment cores to identify bulbil density. So there's a lot of practices happening and research happening on the ground, and this program helped bring those people together to help share those practices, and then also work with this on the ground program of getting people to use these stations where we had placed them. In the end, we got about 35 stations installed on 23 different water bodies with starry stonewort. We had over the course of 3 summers, we had 29 stations hooked up to a tool tracking software. And then CD3 used an algorithm to kind of identify a boat cleaning session, which multiple tool use within a short enough time frame is how they calculated that. And so this helped us track the efficiency of our outreach program with the tool tracking. We saw over 60% increase in tool usage over a few summers with this local outreach, and just the visibility of the stations being there. So that equated to about 4,000 boats in the first summer that we were tracking tools, and went up to 6,000 boats cleaned across 29 stations in the program. So pretty good coverage of those boaters that may not be caught in these decon stations, may not be stopping at the decon stations, or where there may not be an inspector. We're able to have these tools there 24/7. And I would like to note that there is a light on that, the station, and the light gets used a lot as well. So could show that people, those night boaters, are also being caught with this approach. But overall, the collaborative outreach was the key piece. We presented as with our partners at over 180 different lake association meetings. We had newsletters posted, local media outlets covering workshops. That grassroots outreach over the course of 3 summers hit around 23,000 individuals in in-person contact. And then on the statewide media campaign, we partnered with Leighton Media to make these short videos. They're 15 and 30 seconds long, and then sharing them using video streaming ads and digital ads. So the hit a broad base with some targeted IP addresses to folks who are lake advocates or are anglers. So it even gave us down to that data. Anglers were the #1 viewer of this series, which generated 1.5 million impressions over the course of 2 summers that we had the digital marketing piece to it. And that reached about a 70% completion rate. So it also really drove people to prevention websites on the DNR and also taught folks some of those clean, drain, dry practices, where to find a station, where to look for to find a map of where stations are located or where decon units are, where you can go and clean your boat and participate in that behavior. So hitting people with that broad statewide message as well. So the next phase of Stop Starry, looking ahead, is to build on the collaborative we currently have. I recognize a lot of you in this meeting because you are participating in Stop Starry, but we also have other regional collaboratives like the AIS Boundary Waters Collaborative or the ABC group. It's a similar framework to the Stop Starry program, just with a boundary waters focus on preventing AIS spread in and around the Rainy River watershed. And our next phase with Stop Starry is to really start to combine efforts between these regional groups that we have and make a statewide shielding effort to be proactive against starry stonewort and other invasive species, and build that boater compliance so that this can be a norm of clean, drain, dry, and building out the partnerships so we can learn those innovative strategies and build the case studies for how do you control starry stonewort and other invasives based off of local approaches to doing that. And so expanding with bringing in these collaboratives in a statewide effort to do shielding of lakes that are at high risk. And what we need to move forward in this step, and Jeff will cover this a bit more, is that we need to sustain this statewide partnership through these regional collaboratives. But that really does require institutional resources. These stations are not cheap. They also, as I mentioned, come with a lot of administrative time and effort to coordinate installation. There's also not long-term data that we need on preventing and managing starry stonewort. And we need to develop those controls as it is still continuing to spread. And this will require statewide investments in the long-term AIS prevention management and require this collective basis of regional groups that we have to work at a statewide legislative level. Which leads more now into what Jeff is going to speak on is kind of what's this legislative approach to continuing AIS prevention in the state and building on the success of these regional collaboratives and partnerships like Stop Starry.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me, Sammy? Give me a thumbs up if I'm coming through. Oh, good. So one of the things in Minnesota that we noticed early on was that there were different organizations working in different silos. So there was, county resource managers working, tribal resource managers working, Minnesota DNR, and there was a role for local engagement. We kind of have this umbrella organizations doing AIS work, and we saw our role really as trying to build a base at the ground level to push AIS prevention in the state. We made the case to the Minnesota legislature. They responded with the county AIS prevention aid in 2014. I saw, this is our graph. It was made by Steve Henry in Cass County, Minnesota. I think Raining White maybe worked on it some too, from Leech Lake Band of Ojibwa. I saw a presentation this morning from MASERC, and they had different modeling strategies for AIS in Minnesota, the spread, new infestations in Minnesota, and they all kind of echoed this same graph. I mean, even one was an infectious disease model that showed that in 2014, we bent the curve of new AIS infestations. The money, the legislature made $10 million available across the state, allocated it by county based on the number of watercraft access, public watercraft accesses they had, and then the size of the accesses based on the number of boat watercraft parking spots at the access. So some counties that have a lot of accesses or large accesses get more, others get less. And it really became a model for different on-the-ground strategies to advance prevention. For instance, in Minnesota, Lake Minnetonka, which is right outside the Twin Cities, is a vastly different social, environmental kind of complex than northern Minnesota up by the boundary waters. Different value systems, different reasons for people wanting to go there and recreate. Our lakes and our areas, the areas of different lakes in the state are very different. This provided the flexibility for local people to engage on this. I think, Sammy, oh, good. One of the problems we had was last year during the legislative session, the legislature had a bill in that would have cut this funding in half. We pushed pretty hard. We have a lobbyist, and we kind of rallied the troops, and people wrote letters and sent emails. I think there was about 7,000 sent in, and the legislature decided to pause for 2 years. So, and then cut it in half. So right now, as the law stands, there's full funding 25, 26. On July 1 of 2027, if the current legislation, the current statute stands, the county AIS prevention aid will be cut to $5 million statewide, which will leave it up to either the counties to pay for this or it won't get paid for. It'll be, the program will just be cut. There's some hurdles in Minnesota right now. We have a record number of legislative retirements. Last I saw, I think it's 36, maybe 38 senators and House members are retiring. That's the most I remember. I've been doing this 30 years now. I think it might be the most in history. We're going to have a new governor. We're still looking at record state deficits, and we have a historically divided partisanship. One of the superpowers of our organization is that we are bipartisan. Water is bipartisan. Water is not a partisan issue. We have 50,000 contacts in our database. We ran an algorithm on it, and it came back with 48% Democrat, 46% Republican, people identifying as one party or the other. That pretty much mirrors the political demographics in the state of Minnesota. So that's good. And we have members in every legislative district in the state. So we've got at least one person in every legislative district that can talk to their legislator and let them know how important this is. And in a cut session, when they're cutting, it wasn't just AIS that got cut. They're cutting schools, they're cutting police, they're cutting roads, they're cutting everything, right? But this piece is, so when you go to meet with the legislators, they say, well, gee, we know you care and we know that this is important to you, but really everybody's taking a hit. With protecting water, though, in the state of Minnesota, 6 counties, in 6 counties, more than 50% of the property tax base is lake, home, and cabin properties, shoreline properties. So if those property values fall as a result of an AIS infestation, then that means that there's less money for schools, there's less money for roads, there's less money for police, there's less money for all of those local services that local governments have to provide. So really protecting our waters is protecting our communities, is protecting our state. And so that's the case that we've been making. I get calls from people saying, this law or that law or whatever their issue is. And they're like, well, if we just get every lake association together and we really get loud, we can just ram this through. And I have to remind them that even though water is important to every person in the state, lake, home, and cabin owners make up about 300,000. There's about 300,000 lake, home, and cabin properties in Minnesota. That's less than 5% of the Minnesota population. So we're not a monolith. So we have to be organized and we have to be loud and we have to have the data, the science on our side. We have to do a lot of awareness. And so that's what we're gearing up to do. Another issue that we've seen is lake associations, and the same is true of agencies. There's different parts of AIS management is in different departments within the DNR. There's federal waters in the state, so Army Corps of Engineers plays a role. Tribes certainly play a big role. Counties have a role to play. Local governments, townships, cities have a role to play. So all of these entities are kind of siloed. And what Sammy was laying out with the Stop Starry program is really our effort to bring this diverse base together to common purpose, to create alignment among the programs with kind of each entity, each person doing what they can do within their capacity, within their jurisdiction, and align those roles to get better outcomes. So our opportunity, and I was kind of trying to be a little bit funny, but the opportunities that we have is there's going to be a record number of retirements in the legislature, and we're going to have a new governor, which means that we have an opportunity to talk to people, right? Between the end of the legislative session and November election, policymakers, elected officials are going to be listening. They're going to be out and about, and there's an opportunity to talk to them. That's a good thing. There's lots of good data. I'm really grateful to the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. I know Doug has worked on this. A lot of you on this call have worked on it, pulling the data together. And AIS prevention saves money in the long run. It has bipartisan support. It brings lakes together. It's good for communities. It's important. We're working to increase our grassroots networks, communicate with candidates and legislators. And if you're working for government, it can be difficult to get out there and advocate. But there's lake associations within your jurisdiction where you operate, they can advocate. So you can support them and they can support you, and we need to align these capacities. And the policy partnerships that Sammy's been working to really deepen and establish really drive engagement. They are kind of across counties. There's a lot of capacity there that we're seeing that comes out of this effort. Next slide. So we are gearing up right now. We've got this legislative session, and then the summer, and then next year. About this time next year, the legislature will be drafting their final budget bill for fiscal year 2027, 2028. Between now and then, we're going to get louder on the need for AIS prevention, on the money that it saves, on the kind of amenities it provides, and the fact that we've been successful in reducing kind of the general curve that you would expect to see in new AIS infestations in the state. We have that data now. So get it out there. We're going to use earned media in statewide outlets. So we've hired a publicist, and we'll be working to get stories in, Minnesota Public Radio, WCCO Radio, Duluth News Tribune, Star Tribune, paper in Rochester. We've subscribed with the Public News Service, which reaches about 2 million people. An article from them reaches about 2 million people a week. And Public News Service, think of Associated Press for local media outlets. So they do canned stories for local weekly papers and local radio stations that will play, during their news broadcasts or will be in the paper. And then, as Sammy talked about, the How Well Do You Know Minnesota, the AIS public service announcement. And we'll kind of be trying to create this drumbeat. Next slide. Local messaging, our Water Connects Us All newsletter gets about 10,000 opens and reads a month. We can tell how people are clicking. We'll be doing a series of articles that we'll send out to all, there's about 520 lake associations in the state, and we'll be doing articles for them that they can put in their summer newsletters. It's a service we provide for lake associations because we know from doing our own newsletters how difficult it is to find content sometimes. And these are great because they go out and they sit around on the coffee table all summer long, and people kind of page through them while they're waiting for dinner or other points in the day. We'll be doing blog articles. We'll be doing social media posts. We're going to speak at probably 70 plus lake association meetings or events like State Fair. We had a booth, county fairs, farmers markets, kind of wherever we can get. And then finally, if we can raise the money, I'd like to put 5, 6, 7, 8 billboards focused on AIS efforts, prevention efforts in the state of Minnesota, kind of around the state. As people are running for office, they spend a lot of time on the roads. And if they open their local paper and they see an article about the importance of AIS prevention in the state of Minnesota, and then they get in their car to drive to a meeting and they pass a billboard about the same issue, and they walk into the room and one of their constituents asks them their position, I think they'll start to understand how important this is to the state of Minnesota. Next slide. And then finally, kind of to cap it off, we're going to be having, when the AIS Prevention Aid first rolled out, I think I met many of you probably the first time at the AIS Summit, Aquatic Invasive Summit that we had in 2015, the year after the funding came in. And many of you that are on this call worked on the local AIS action framework, which we kind of pulled together during that conference. And that was really sort of the first blueprint for like, okay, what does a local plan look like? What pieces does it have? It has inspection, decontamination, communication, education, kind of the fundamental tools. 2016, we had another summit and we worked through reporting. The counties received the money from the Department of Revenue. But then they can submit a report to the DNR on their outcomes and what they've been doing. And those reports are really useful for getting data on how well the program is working. Those reports were kind of put together during the 2016 summit, working with Phil Hunsinger, who was, I think, Doug, your predecessor in this job. And then we did another one in 2018. And then we paused. We're going to do another one in 2027 in St. Paul at the River Center. And we'll adjourn the summit. If you're there and you're wearing your DNR hat or your county hat as one of the speakers or a participant in it, you can take that hat off, and then we're going to get into a bus and we're going to go to the Capitol and we're going to rally in support of AIS prevention in the state of Minnesota. So that's kind of our plan, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this with you. We'll be reaching out asking for support. What you can do. Encourage people to connect with MLR and join MLR. As we go to these Lake Association meetings, they talk about their prevention programs and they say, oh, well, we got a county grant. And there's a widespread understanding among citizens that the money that they get for their AIS inspector is a grant from the county. And they haven't made the connection that the money for that grant is supplied by the state, that it's state money. And so they don't get always how important this AIS prevention aid is. So connect it for them. Say, here's the grant that you're getting. We've using state money that was raised through the efforts of MLR for your grant, so that they understand why this is important. We do have a nonprofit side of MLR, fully tax deductible. There's no barriers to participation by counties. I know that most counties have a communications budget. If you can direct some of that to us for the next 2 years to help fund things like billboards and the media campaign we're doing, that would be awesome. And then you can sponsor or be a partner at the Aquatic Invasive Summit, which will be nonpartisan, non-political, focused on the science, community building, all things that are within your bailiwick. Next slide. Thank you.
And this is
I hope
my
we made the
plug.
time, Doug. Go,
This is
Sammy.
my plug too. If we are actively, as we said, building this base, if you have an interest and want to learn more and participate in one of these pilots, you can reach out to me and I can get you connected with the right group for you. That was my shameless plug. So, yeah, I think we hit right on time, Doug.
Thank you so much, Sammy and Jeff, for your comments and your expertise. Just have a comment on that. As state employees, we can't advocate to the legislature. Oh, shoot.
Hey there, Doug.
We lost Doug.
We lost Doug. And to his point about not being able to advocate,
Sorry,
that's true.
I lost you there for a
yeah.
second. Yeah, my internet's wonky here. Sorry about that. But we can't advocate, but we can educate.
Mhm.
And so
we can advocate.
Yes, and you can do
Yeah.
things that we as state employees or perhaps county employees can't do, but I can't emphasize enough the role of advocacy around this issue and how this has been so important for us to achieve our successes across the Great Lakes region.
And certainly
So-
you're the people, the face of these programs too. So it's important that people hear your stories and hear your success and the work that you're putting in on these local efforts every day too. And our efforts are mostly to get it out there and share your work as well. So if you've got cool stories as well, we're looking to share them.
Yep, and we've got faces in 83 of our 87 counties as well that can also partner in this effort. Everything that we've done on prevention of AIS and the state of Minnesota and beyond is based on collaboration and partnerships. Let's see, I don't see any questions in the chat other than some comments. If anybody would like to come off mic and ask any questions, we've got a couple minutes. I'll read Brian's comment. He says, I get a lot of questions regarding why we need decontamination. And Janine replied, Brian, I think it's like a good, better, best scenario. Good being just self-inspection, better being tool station CD3, best thing being decontamination. I view it in a similar way. So thanks for that, Janine.
We get
And
a lot of the same comments in our program, and exactly that. We always make sure that we're connecting when we've installed the CD3 with a lake association on the lake, and we connect them with the access owner or local partner that owns the equipment. So there is it's meant to be in tandem with what those your local inspection project and decontamination programs.
Yep. And Adam Dahl also put in an important distinction. Additionally, CD3 stations or units rely on voluntary usage from boaters. Decon units are used by trained inspectors to use hot water and reduce the risk of anything leaving the access alive. Another important distinction. So at risk of me losing my internet, I'm going to turn on my video for just a second. This is for Aaron Anderson, who says he would like to know where that shirt is. I've got it on, and I'm wearing the hat.
And you've got the claws.
I got the claws.
Where'd you get it, Doug? Fleet Farm?
Oh, no, I think it was Gander Mountain. I'm going to turn my video back on. We got another minute before we have concluding remarks.
So, Doug, I think since we're not getting question, I think if you can make a plug, I think a lot of the things that were talked about in this presentation are a pretty good plug-in to our next workshop. If you want to do a plug, I know you put them on the chat, but if you can just mention those.
Yep, I'm going to do that next. So here's the agenda for our next workshop on the 24th. So I'm going to give an overview of prevention in Minnesota. We'll have Nick Phelps is going to talk about the 3 studies that Jeff referred to. We'll have Steve Henry, who will talk about his analysis that also Jeff shared. Drew Dickert is going to be with us, and he's going to discuss a county survey that we'll be administering very, very shortly. Unfortunately, we won't have results for that yet. And then we'll have a
I think we lost Doug again. So we're going to have a local AIS Prevention 8 panel, and you can just see the names, and that's just going to be a good place to ask any questions and just talk about anything that's related to the Prevention 8.
Well, if my internet would stay up, then I'd be able to finish my sentences. Sorry about that, folks.
And
then we'll have a panel of all of our speakers. And then lastly, here is our workshop for the 25th, which Rafa is going to facilitate with Megan Weber. Some of our county folks are going to talk along with Mazurk, and then also about PA Charter from Mazurk, and Eric Kinney and April are going to talk about upcoming DNR pilots. So just a plug. So we just got 4 minutes left, so I'd just like to make some final comments. I want to thank again to all of our speakers for their presentations and time and expertise. As we've learned, the spread of aquatic invasive species is not just a Minnesota issue. This workshop highlighted just a tiny bit of our collaboration going on across the nation to address the AIS challenge. We did this workshop to inform you a little bit about just some of the efforts that are happening at national, regional, and state levels, and we hope that we've achieved that goal by providing you with these perspectives, knowledge about programs, and recent national AIS threats. And hopefully, at the least, you appreciate that these efforts are happening and consider supporting these efforts in ways that have been suggested. If you have any ideas on how you'd like to do this, Rafa and I, along with our DNR staff, would be interested in hearing your thoughts so we can make it into a coordinated effort across the state. So thank you all very much for attending, and special thanks to Rafa and for helping to coordinate today, and also for our other DNR staff who supported us today. Rafa, you have a final thought you'd like to offer?
No, I just want to thank our presenters again for coming in and giving us all this great information. If it wasn't for them just preparing these great presentations and taking the time out of their day, we wouldn't be able to provide these awesome workshops for you all. So thank you again for coming in, and hopefully we'll see you in the next ones. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. This was great.
Am I back?